Yeah, so I'm looking back at the so I guess maybe let's talk about release 7 first. So that was the work we did in October. Um, I think one of the things I did that took sort of a long time is this the removing the expandable sidebar. I essentially ended up like rebuilding the sidebar, and the the old sidebar just didn't work at all. It was like, if you had it expanded, which was the default, it was just like, it wouldn't even show you things by default. You needed to click on something, which was unintuitive. And my goal with all this was to start adding sort of info boxes and be able to, show people how things worked, and provide a sort of like a built-in, anytime you're looking at something, um, you can see where the code is, or like, sorry, how the code works, how the product works. And I long term intend to have that on everything. So it's like, oh, here's a result type. What is a result type? Oh, here's what a result type is. Here's what users have said about the result type. Here's the docs about the result type. That kind of thing. So I got it like, I stripped it down, I refactored it, and then when I started adding it in, I was just like burnt out on CSS and that sort of thing. I was like, okay, I'm going to call it a day here. So that is still the actual improvement that I wanted to do is still waiting to be done, because this took like a week or a week and a half to actually do.
Yeah, was that around the same time that you started introducing Tailwind into things?
Um, I don't think it was the first thing I did with Tailwind, but there was a lot of Tailwind in this one.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Oh yeah, was that where
um,
you removed a lot of like old CSS?
there was a
Like,
lot of old CSS
yeah.
removed. Yeah.
When you say
I'm
yeah, you say your
sorry, go
motivation was
ahead.
to have info boxes, or do you mean for now in the sidebar itself to kind of expand upon those sections, or
So like, yeah, when you expand over the section, it should be like, what is a HTTP server, or what is a
okay,
HTTP handler, all the way down to what should be in the docs and possibly isn't, but like, here's how to use variables. Here's the structure of the input box. How do I do X, Y, and Z? Like, those should all be sort of accessible from it. I hadn't quite come up with a um sort of a UI for it, but I guess it was supposed to be like, here's an overview and here's a click more link. And even if at the start that just goes to docs, that would be a start.
right? Yes, that understandably took a while. Um, lots of
I
changes.
realize I'm just looking through the changelog here, and I see one of the things I want to do. So like, the entire Dark website or the entire Dark app uses Fira Mono, which is a monospace font.
Hmm.
Um, and or Fira code, Fira Mono combination. Um, but we use it even for things which should absolutely not be a monospace font. So we use it for, well, literally, it's just the whole site is Fira Mono, except where we say Fira code. And so I was trying to introduce Source Sans Pro as our new font for, yeah, exactly there where we say no HTTP handlers.
Yeah, it's just
Um,
kind of like, oh, it
and
doesn't need to be monospace.
Yeah, so I tried it, and it was just like, could not do it. It was just like, and this is part of why we're moving to Tailwind, because it was just like impossible to actually do this change. Um,
Why?
bec I think because the specificity of what we did, it just like it kept winning.
Yeah, the hierarchy of CSS rules just kind of bit you.
Yeah, and then if we had to add it in to a certain place, then it took everything below it with it, and it was just very, very difficult, and it really highlighted why Tailwind is great. Um, like, you can sort of structure your application in the way that in the way that makes sense for the code, as opposed to a way that makes sense for the CSS specificity rules.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I've not had to deal with Dark's CSS, uh, I guess, history yet, so we'll see.
I
Maybe
mean, it might be gone by the time you get there.
great. Yeah, because
Yeah,
you've been
like
doing
if
some good work there, and then another user, Ocean Oak, has been submitting
yeah,
some PRs towards that.
yeah, exactly.
That's great. So maybe I'll just hold off until it's stable.
Yeah, I imagine we'll keep CSS for the code display because, um, sorry, we'll keep like, I suppose it's, well, yeah, I suppose CSS instead of like styling, because we don't, we basically have a span for almost every character in the code display, so
Yeah,
we don't want to like duplicate for that.
yeah. This could be a lot
Yeah,
of dark, not dark, Tailwind classes to try to fit that into
exactly. Yeah.
Tailwind.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm I'm looking through some of the source code, and I was like, what caused this to go to to be so difficult? And I'm like, oh, I had to fix a lot of integration tests. That was one of the major things. It's like the integration tests like magically became unstable. Um, that happened to me multiple times.
That's odd with styling changes. Like I could imagine some selector disappearing or no longer being valid, but
I think they're very susceptible um to just like timing changes. So it's very easy to have data races. Um, and in particular where like we the page what's it, playwright the playwright code is it's not really written with a lot of like syncing points because it just kind of worked and then when it doesn't work it's like oh we actually need to wait for something to be loaded here or
yeah.
the analysis to finish here and the waiting for the analysis to finish um, is a pretty annoying one. But there's also like waiting for the cursor to be in the right box and that kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. So for anyone watching, this is what one of our integration tests look like. They're on this integration test thing. We're using Playwright within here, but there's some of these weightings are finicky.
Yeah. So like yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Anyway,
doesn't matter which ones it is, but yeah, it's unpleasant. Um so yeah, that was the sidebar. Much more work than was expected. And I tried to quickly throw in a um an information box and it was just like the CSS was in the wrong shape or the things were in the wrong shape. I'm like, I don't care. I'm not looking at this. We're putting this away.
yeah, it was an improvement. We no longer have to maintain that expandable sidebar. So take the win.
Yeah, because that was a nightmare. And like we started there and then it just gradually as we maintained both the collapsed sidebar and the expanded sidebar, it just like gradually became a nightmare.
Yeah, it's a lot of real estate too. The expanded one, where we want to
Yeah,
like use more real estate for other things.
yeah.
There are times where I miss
I'd
the old
rather
sidebar, but most of the time I've gotten used to the new.
yeah. I'd rather sort of like teach people how to how to use one thing rather than two.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, and then there was, yeah, I think actually didn't put in the change log at all, but like, you do occasionally get to put nice little fixes that are meaningful, even though they're like one line of code. And so the thing where now if you like drag it diagonally down, it doesn't immediately close. Um,
what?
if you go back to the thing,
Yeah,
go back to dark. So like open one of the, like hover over something in the sidebar,
okay,
maybe something with code in. So if you were to go down to like impertinent woodchuck,
yeah.
um, and you crossed over something else, it used to close. It used to be like just very quick to close.
Oh, I see.
Um,
Hmm.
um, yeah, and now it's much
You mean
better.
if you like try to when you're navigating with your mouse quickly?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I see.
yeah, so there was some little nice things. What about you? What were you working on?
The biggest thing I think I did in release 7 was deal with the reconstruction of some patterns within match expressions. So there used to be this
Hmm.
case where if you had a match like this, then you highlighted, that amount of code, it wouldn't reconstruct properly. It would kind of copy too much. And that
Hmm.
was true of a number of different things. And I encountered that because I was working on tuples, but it was a general problem. So anyway, that took longer than I anticipated. The
So that one was kind of interesting, right? There was something that went super wrong, and I'm kind of forgetting what it was.
Something that went super wrong. I mean, the old
Oh
algorithm
yeah, it
was
was.
just poor.
Why was it resizing?
Why was it
Like the
resized?
resizing was really interesting, right? Because so the idea was we sort of like deleted back, and then if something resized or reflowed, maybe was it?
Yeah, reflow exactly. So it's like as you're deleting characters, the surrounding structure around whatever we're doing, because the algorithm is basically like delete until we're at the start, right? That was kind of like the
Hmm.
naive algorithm, but it did it based on position, like position 0 or whatnot.
Hmm.
Um, and positions can change as you're deleting things because surrounding structures disappear. For example, this tuple structure that's around this 1, 2, 3 disappears as you go. So you hit backspace, and the number of backspaces does not equal the number of characters visually.
Hmm.
So rather than use this fixed position, the new algorithm um, has reference of what AST position we're in, where the caret
Hmm.
actually starts and ends. Um,
Right.
so I still don't think it's
Yeah.
perfect, but it's much better.
Um, yeah, I haven't seen anything wrong with it. But the thing that's interesting is like as we it seems like, oh, tuples are now like slightly improved. But it also kind of opens up a lot of or it fixes a lot of bugs that would be coming as we add more sort of reflows. So right now the only reflow that sort of happens is when you make a function call, when the function call jumps from like being single line to being multi-line. Um, but you certainly couldn't backspace from a multi-line one into a single line one because that would move your cursor to the wrong place, and all of a sudden you'd be stuck. And we have a lot of these kind of why is dark annoying me? Like why is this editor janky kind of thing? So finding places like this where we do it wrong and coming up with a much better algorithm, I think are going to have like a long-term kind of effect.
Yeah, yeah. The algorithm is certainly a part, and just generally stopping referring to positions and starting to refer to caret targets or AST refs more often is probably
Yeah.
the win. Just because code changes, it still becomes awkward when one of your ends of a selection is the thing that disappears. Like if I were to
Hmm.
delete, because then like, what do you do? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm sure we'll encounter more and more of those over time. But anyway, that was a fun thing to fix there. Um, Besides that, I fixed a tuple interaction. I think this is actually a lie. I think I was just fixing one of them. If you were in some code and your cursor was, let's say here, you have some text and you
Hmm.
start typing 1 right here, it would just
Hmm.
replace, like if I type right here, it would just replace that first item with a 1.
Hmm.
Um, there was some code in the expression world, the code, the dark code that handles expressions that dealt with that situation, and I didn't know to copy it over. So anyway, stumbled
Hmm.
upon that, got that resolved. Besides that, yeah, I didn't get a ton in release 7. I was moving. Uh,
Oh yeah, yeah. You moved to where are you living?
I'm in Vermont now, which is quite the quite the trek.
Yeah. I've moving coming up. I'm not looking forward to that.
Yeah, lovely.
So one of the internal changes I made was sort of simplifying the editor. Um, and it led to like some faster loading, like the UI before we switched to F sharp was like slow as fuck. It was just like really slow, like dozens, well, maybe not dozens, but a dozen seconds. And at least on my internet, it is now pretty instant.
Are you referring
Um,
to like the old API server, or are you referring to the actual front
the
end code, or what?
the the whole thing, just like take everything into account. I guess I was really talking about like, what order things load in the browser and so on. And
Okay.
so, as well as things like the initial load API call being fast, things not being serialized. Um, some of the stuff I did this time is like combine things into multiple files, move them, like preloaded a bunch of stuff, move stuff into a CDN, or moved Font Awesome to like a out of our thing. We were loading it directly from things. So just kind of like, you know, a bunch of nice small fixes. And where we ended up at the end of it is like this thing's actually fast. Most of it wasn't done in this, but it was just sort of like topping it off at the end. Um, and yeah, not the highest win, but it's kind of feels nice to have these small wins. You can't always be spending time on like these big massive projects that are going to
Yeah, yeah, definitely
improve
feels.
things.
Yeah, things definitely feel snappy overall. I am the AOT is still not AOT, but the analysis playback is still sometimes a little bit slow. It's the only
Yeah,
slowness I feel right now. But hopefully with .NET 7 shortly, we can get some wins there.
yeah. Um, it does feel like .NET 7 is going to be like a nice performance improvement there. My question would be .NET 7 is not an LTS release.
Hmm.
So how do we feel about switching? Um, I don't particularly like the idea of a jump from 6 to 9 in what, like 2 years or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I I would go for it. I think it's worth the risk. Um, like there might be some like LTS or non-LTS pains, but I've hit
Hmm.
very few issues with like .NET being super buggy and non-LTS.
Yeah,
I mean, there's like support, but how often do we actually talk to support?
it's these days we have like really good testing.
Yeah,
So there's a lot of tests like that. And actually, I'll say as well that they are very good at like putting out release notes. So if they change the behavior or something, they are telling you. And um, it's kind of easy to avoid the downsides of this sort of thing.
yeah. I think most of the stuff we use in .NET, a lot of, I mean, there are like so many companies that would be complaining if things changed, etc. That
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
only like the
exactly.
really niche parts that we're touching, like the Blazor WebAssembly stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
that we might hit issues. But we've already hit issues in LTS things in .NET 6. So
yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
I think Laser is early enough that we're going to hit edge points of that again and again.
Yeah,
But fortunately, it's not part of the thing that has to keep working above all costs. Um, like
meaning being the
at
media
all,
server.
yeah, yeah. So like the the server side execution must, in all cases, not change, or at least to the ability that we have. Um, but the client analysis, if there's a bug in it, we can fix the bug. Great.
Yeah.
Um, One of the other things I did, I added the return type of called functions in the documentation box. And that was one of those projects where again I bit off more than I could chew. I basically started a redesign of like, what information can we get in here? Um, and just like tried to put as much um like I started okay, so what I did was I took a Figma, started building a thing in Figma and trying to like figure out how it looked in Figma, and then by the time I had that finished, I was like burnt out of it, and I was like, okay, I'm just not going to do that right now.
That's referring to this, correct? This returns any.
Um, no, it's the one above that. So the one in green. Oh, you can't see green. Um, the two lines above the word REPL.
Oh, I see. Got it.
Yeah. So that wasn't there. And so people couldn't see the return types. It matters less for functions like that, but for the
Yeah.
standard library functions.
Right. Cool. Yeah, we should continue to slowly expand what we display here.
Well, so what I really want to do is I want to move to a that when you're editing a handler, it is fixed in place and the things are like nicely chromed around it.
Mm.
So I don't actually like this, what we do of like we're editing on in the canvas itself. Um, and what it's supposed to be like is if you go to a function definition here.
I got weak functions, but yeah.
So like, it sort of brings you to this screen that's sort of off the canvas, which can be confusing in its own right. There's plans to fix that, but it should be here's the code, and you can scroll through the code as if it's an editor. We'll show you, the good Chrome around it. So what we do currently is just like jamming the docs directly above it. Um, might not be the right approach, and it might be much less make it all visible and a lot more make it all accessible.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. Yeah, sometimes the visibility can be a little bit overwhelming.
Yeah,
For example, I was working on some code recently, and once they, yeah, for like here, I feel like half my screen is the parameters, and maybe
yeah.
that's not quite the same thing because this is more input rather than um, the
I mean,
effects or
that's a
realizing
great example
effects.
because it's all white space.
Yeah, it's all white space. It
Yeah,
just feels like I don't know. My brain doesn't go to the code, or my eyes don't go to the code, and
yeah,
that feels it feels wrong. So
yeah.
even if it was accessible in the sense that if I hovered over something and it showed up in some kind of inlay, or I could expand collapse or something,
Right, right, right,
that
right.
accessibility would be
And
great.
and especially with the dragging, this is basically there so that they can be individually removed and dragged. But that could happen, or it could reformat to that when you put the mouse over it, and it doesn't. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the most annoying things for me is the scrolling down there. You have to like scroll the whole canvas down.
Yeah, you have to scroll the canvas instead of the thing.
Right, right. And if your code is long enough, you can now no longer see the doc strings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's sort of why I'm thinking about like, let's move it to maybe, feeling a little more like a traditional um editor kind of thing where you can scroll the actual code separate from the outline or whatever.
Yeah.
All right. What
There's a
else?
few smaller updates that were done.
So
String
that
to
are,
float
are you
got
are you
renamed.
into are you into November yet or
I can
October?
be. Yeah, we update some docs. I'm just seeing if there's anything interesting else in 7. Bunch of docs, some internal stuff. Um, yeah, we can go to 8 to
Uh,
November's.
so I like the first one here because that's also what I just claimed we did in October. Um,
Well, we did
in
part of
in
it here, and then part of it was
right because I thought I had done it in. in release 7, and I guess I'd broken it somehow. I think
Oh,
I think I hadn't changed the request to gets. I think they were still posts, and so they weren't actually preloading. So that was fun.
lesson learned. Yeah, as far as release 8 went, my biggest thing was dealing with client types. We have we have all these basically DTOs, data transfer objects, between the client and backend, and I wanted to like basically rename one thing, and it turned into like this whole experience where like I'm creating lots of DTOs and transferring, because basically we have, I'm going to dive into this just briefly. We have these things that have been called patterns, which are used within match expressions. So you have, match just 1, 2, 3, and you can decompose that with an expression, or with a pattern. Anyway, so we've had these patterns for ages, which have been great, but the word pattern is kind of ambiguous. And so there's this effort to rename them to match patterns. And in that, we have a history
That's because
of,
you want to add destructuring and lets.
yeah, I want to basically have you be able to do like let a comma b. Of course, I can't do it now, but a comma b of like list partition or something where it's returning two things, and I want to decompose it right here. And so the term that made most sense here is that, oh well, this is also a pattern. This is a let pattern, like let decomposition pattern, whatever. So anyway, so I had to disambiguate patterns, and to do that, had to update, the verbiage throughout all of our code, and along with the verbiage, we end up, um, you know, we have patterns throughout a few things. For example, expressions and match patterns, where we prefix the different discriminant union cases with an e and an p to to kind of clarify what we're looking at. And all these things were just like p variable, p constructor, and it just took a lot of effort to allow it to be np bool, because the client and server are both expecting p bool. So long story short, we now have this not totally new, but largely new client types layer, where we define all these client facing types and convert them between internal and external types, which is going to be useful long term to allow us to update things more easily. So that was the majority of my work for release 8, was dealing with that, with all those DTOs.
So the DTOs, I think is an interesting thing, because we now have DTOs basically everywhere, right? It's in the serializers. We have them in the sorry, I said the serializers. I meant the database serializers for storing the code in sort of like this fast binary format.
Yeah.
Um, we have it as well in talking between the API and the front end. So we're now in a position where we can make almost any internal changes without breaking a serialization.
Yeah. We're
So
pretty
the actual
close.
change you did. Oh, what's left?
There are a few places we call like dot serialize, outside of like the normal conventions. I forget exactly where it is, but I forget them offhand. But I know there are just like a small handful of places,
Mm-hmm.
where we might have to be careful. But yeah, I mean, 95% plus we can make internal changes and not worry about the client breaking. Whereas before, we'd have to be
Yeah.
careful with any renames.
And there we go. Sorry, I finally figured out how to delete that.
I just saw
Uh,
it.
yeah,
Same,
like
same.
so if I seem distracted for the last like 5 minutes, it's like, how do I moderate things on Twitch?
That's funny.
Um, cool. So I'm really looking forward to getting to the point where, every change we make doesn't have to be involved with or it doesn't have to have like a 2 week refactor leading up to it.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah. Because
seems like
I
we're
feel
there
that the
almost.
client types was exactly that. It was like, the actual change an hour, 2 hours, like it was a search and replace.
Yeah.
Um, and the lead up to it was significant.
Yeah. Yeah, it was significant to get there. There's still a little bit of a dance in terms of like the rename. Like we have to do a thing where update the, at least in my case, so everything was expecting like p variable, and I'd update everything to expect either p variable or mp variable. So you update
Yeah.
decoders on both sides, and you wait until the clients are caught up, and then you update the encoders, and then you can remove the old
Hmm.
references. So there's still a little dance, but it's not bad.
Yeah. And you could also have like just not renamed on the client. Like you could have left it on the back end for quite some time.
Yeah, but that would bug me.
Yeah, no, no, for real. Um, there's the similar stuff that I have hopes for in the future is um adding new um um adding new versions of language constructs. So I think I've probably talked about this before, but I want to add a new if statement that only takes booleans. Um, and obviously there's the you can't just like change the meaning of the old if statement in people's programs. And so like having that DTO and having sort of the ability to change some things where we know that the type and then eventually like kind of like migrate it out of existence over some time is something I'm looking forward to.
Yeah.
Um, I think I spent most of November. I was on vacation. I took a week's vacation to Hong Kong, but I think I spent most of the rest of the time on this Ubuntu 22 upgrade. And what that was actually was, had a couple of contributors come in wanting to wanting to make some changes and really kind of struggling in getting things working, especially on WSL, which is the Windows subsystem for Linux, which is the what you need for Docker um, to run on Linux. So ended up sort of like removing a bunch of stuff, but then getting the upgrade. I don't remember why it was connected to getting the upgrade to 22. Oh, it was because wanted to remove Ubuntu. Sorry, not Ubuntu. Wanted to remove OCaml because the OCaml stuff was like really, really slow to build for users that didn't have the fancy machines that we have. So it's all sort of like, strung together. Can we get this upgraded to Ubuntu? And eventually I ended up pulling out all the OCaml stuff and putting it into a separate repo. Um, and there's a bunch of follow-up that we can do there. I'm looking forward to renaming F sharp hyphen backend to just backend.
Yeah.
Um, and deleting some files and that sort of thing, and making it seem like there was never an OCaml thing there. Um, but we are definitely it is definitely nice having it like just sitting over there.
Yeah, I mean, CI has also been faster, which has been great.
Yay, wonderful. Um, so there's two bits of OCaml left, right? So I'm working on one. I'm working on the tracing, and tracing should remove the garbage collector. One hopes, which is one of the services, and then the other service is
Static assets.
static acid. Yes, which we're thinking of just removing that feature.
Yeah, I go back and forth on that.
Oh, interesting.
It's so I think of like, okay, what's Dark? It's a tool that's really good at building backends, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
scalable backends. Uh, and the definition of backend is potentially fuzzy, right? Like APIs, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
connecting to other web stuff, definitely, including
Mm.
databases. Um, Returning static assets, is that a back end thing? I don't know. Like traditionally, it always has been, but it's
Mm.
just like it's not a thing where you compute, which I think it kind of maybe that separates it because there's no
Yeah.
computation involved. Um, but one of the things I really like about Dark for my uses is I don't have to deal with like setup anywhere, right? I push stuff to
Mm.
GitHub or not to GitHub to I write stuff in Dark and it's done. And I really like the idea that I do the same thing where I push to GitHub and my static assets are managed by Dark, right? Um,
Yeah, yeah.
and so
But they're only managed by Dark if you do a bunch of stuff. You have to set up some CI/CD,
yeah,
you have to do the deploy locally, and you have to install a thing, and you have to log into the thing, and like it's not,
it's a dance, yeah.
it's yeah. And it'd be one thing if we could upload it from the UI, that would be, just click upload and it's there, but that's also not what we had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Yeah, I mean, I'm also in two minds about it. The way that we came to have the static assets feature is we're like, all right, if you're building something, what is the set of things that you need to be able to build it, and you are going to have a a set of static assets, and in particular, you want to put it on like a single domain, right? So you don't want Dark to be like API dot my nice site or my nice app.com. You want to just have like my nice app.com. And and then you can load the sort of index file directly from Dark, um, and uh, and then you'd also have, in particular, like the feature flags would work for it. So you could have like separate branches, you could have like atomic switchover, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it never kind of worked. And in particular, it never kind of worked because like Dark is, it's in a data center in Oregon. And maybe one day it will be in many data centers, and it will, the data will be distributed across the world. But right now it's in a Kubernetes cluster in Oregon. And so having, loading your index.html, the whole point of like this, edge computing and the rise of like Vercel and Netlify and Fly and all this other stuff, um, is moving things to the edge, having that first load be like super instant, and you can just see how much like work has gone into server-side rendering, and Rails has this whole thing of like, oh, we're not doing front-end apps, but we're designing our own, the opposite of server-side rendering. I forget what they call it,
Mm-hmm.
but that has the same effect. And we're sitting in that ecosystem saying, oh yeah, load your index.html from our, from Oregon. It doesn't fit nicely. Even in something like, all these front end frameworks are very good at saying index.html will be the smallest thing possible, right? It's going to be like 50 bytes or something, which means that the loading, the slowest part of the loading is actually getting to Oregon and back and going through our, loading the program from a database,
Yeah.
which is going to tell you which file we're going to load from, static assets. So it didn't feel like a great feature. Um, and it felt like the amount of work that it was going to take to be a great feature, just like I say felt like I've already made the decision. But like I'm definitely leaning uh, on the people are already using Netlify. Can we make this a better experience for people using Netlify or Fastly or whatever?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like we have to choose our problems, and that feels like it's kind of outside of the normal scope, and
Yeah,
it's only our problem because Dark already
we've
has
made
it.
it our problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um,
and another
I
thing is,
I was
oh,
so I was really worried about how to do server side rendering. It's like,
hmm,
that's something that you just don't get with Dark. And where if you're using, I guess, Netlify and Vercel, like they've put a shocking amount of work into making that fast. And I don't want to compete on on like the speed of like the spin up of our Node.js server-side rendering fleet or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. In any case, the if static assets were to be deprecated, which I agree it's probably the better thing to do. Long term, a file hosting, like a more general purpose file hosting within Dark probably does make sense. Um,
You mean like not static assets, just like storage buckets?
yeah, storage buckets
Yeah, yeah,
and
I agree with that.
and for the use case like mine where I just want to host an index HTML and I don't care how fast it loads for like, my one-off site. Um,
Yeah,
if we have storage buckets and we have some kind of caching mechanism, that's
yeah.
more than enough for me. Um,
Yeah.
like I'm imagining a little, I don't know, a little cache function that basically says like if it's been less than like half an hour, use the same responses used last time, like in an
Yeah.
index HTML route.
Do you wanna open the ops documentation canvas, because that's exactly what we do.
Is it just ops docs or is it ops documentation?
Ops hyphen documentation. So I think there's a cron that goes every like 5 minutes and it regenerates the
Refresh
page.
cache, yeah.
And so it's just like it pretty prints it, and it's um just what every hour it redoes the documentation page.
And
And then when you actually look,
is user manual the thing
like,
that pulls or root?
no, that I don't know. Probably just slash, I think.
Well, I guess we can look at here. Oh, look at that. We got failed to load traces. Um,
Yeah, because it's huge.
yeah.
So yeah, there's regenerate cache to generate it, and then there's a page somewhere, and all the page it does is it loads it from the DB, and it like shows it to you.
Oh yeah. So
Which,
pretty page is probably the guy.
yeah, which again is not a great, it's not a great feature, because we're loading it from a database instead of like over a CDN or whatever. And this would be something where you would really like to say, we want to store it in cloud storage. We want to do like an eventually consistent thing where it gets a thing, and not, not a database where there's locks and transactions and so on. And we would eventually like to take this handler, have that handler run on the edge next to running storage on the edge.
Yeah. So anyway, I think it's fine to deprecate static assets because like for me, at least selfishly speaking, all I care about is having an index HTML hosted that I don't have to
Yeah,
like
yeah,
find a host for because I just
yeah,
don't. That's just another thing to pay for and deal with an account for and whatnot. One of the big things about Dark for me is like, oh, I don't have to deal with 100 accounts. Of course, if I have like
yeah.
external web things you have to connect to.
Well, so hmm, I'm not sure that's how I view what Dark should be. I think that we are going to be using tons of accounts. Just because that's the world we're in. I was reading something the other day. Someone has like their solo SaaS and they use 50 different things, and we're probably not far from that. We probably use at least 30. It might be 50.
Yeah.
Um, but it'd be nice to be able to manage them all from Dark. So it'd be nice to be able to sign up to them from Dark. So
Yep.
perhaps we would like that. You can view your Netlify deploys from Dark. You can you can use branches and that sort of thing. Dark's branches and things. Maybe you can use Netlify's branches or releases or whatever they're called. Um, yeah, I think I want people signing up to Dark and then being like, I want to send a text message, and instead of being like, oh, I now need to go sign up to Twilio and like copy my key in, I can click the add a Twilio account button, and it's like sign
Yep.
up for a Twilio, and we'll automatically perhaps put through a credit card,
Yep.
that sort of thing.
Yeah, I had that
Um,
experience yesterday with I was going through Plex and I signed up for Title, which is like a hi-fi audio thing. And they have it great where
mhm.
it's like, oh, I don't have to sign up for Title. I just in Plex, they route the money there, and I just
Oh,
don't
nice,
have to
nice,
worry
nice.
about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I have a similar thing with Roku, and actually ends up being a horrible experience. I can't remember what I bought. It was like Paramount. I bought it through Roku, and now I can't use the Paramount app on my phone. It's like, yeah, sorry, you're the customer from a different place. So definitely something we could
Yeah.
avoid.
But anyway, I think we're both leaning in the same direction of static assets
Hmm.
can go away, and now it's just a matter of figuring out what's the deprecation plan.
Yeah. Well, fortunately, there's ones of users.
Yeah.
Yeah, or ones of active users at least. We'll have to figure out how much of the inactive users are actually relying on it. But an email um, is probably the solution.
Yeah.
Um, okay, what
Well,
else we got here?
you updated Rescript. That took a bit.
That was the most annoying thing. So there was this PPX. So PPX is it's sort of like a macro, except you have to write it in OCaml instead of being able to write it in your own language or in the sort of like built-in macro language. But basically, you can take types and you can generate code from it. And there was one that generated basically pretty printers for our types. Yes, this driving shows. So this does nothing now. It doesn't produce anything, but it used to produce a function called show unlocked DBs. And that was really, really quite nice. And it would like nest them and so on.
And it's
So
for
like
debugging purposes, right?
for debugging, but also for like observability and monitoring for like, we wanted to print something to the console, we wanted to send something to our error tracking. Um, all those things was really useful. And now I basically switched it to like just printing the JavaScript representation because this thing no longer worked. And
Yeah.
I looked at like what would it take to upgrade it and make it work. And I imagine if I knew the code base, it might be like one line of code. But it was like context load, these like three different kind of libraries and things, and like then figure out how to build it. And it was just, sort of this like abandoned project that it was not for the weak to take it on. And I was not looking to add that um
To already
to
upgrading
what I
Rescript and dealing with the other package.
right, but also we have like tablecloth and we have Rescript T and like, oh, that was something I did in the last recent while. We released we took over and updated and released Rescript T. That was nice. Rescript hyphen T.
Thought that was somewhere around here. Oh yeah, there it is.
Nope, there it is. Yeah, so this is a framework um, that we've been using for years, and it's sort of wasn't quite abandoned, but is definitely is not the primary author's main work. So updated to Rescript. A lot of this was done by Ocean. Um, so updated to Rescript and removed a bunch of like it did its own JSON. I think it still does a little bit. It did its own updating of the DOM, which we now use Rescript Web API for. So just like just sort of modernize it and use it in our thing. And it actually broke dragging, so you can't drag functions anymore because I fucked up the upgrade. So yay. There we go. That's me. Sorry.
We should. I guess we should throw an integration test around that.
I mean, I would rather remove that dragging. I'm not sure it's the most. It's kind of a cool feature, but
How would you
we
imagine
might
it
have to.
otherwise?
Well, firstly, in that part of the code base needs to be moved, or that part of the display needs to be moved into Fluid. So we will have to recreate that dragging in Fluid anyway. So I'm not super sure, but I don't. It's a nice little feature. It's not like super not the most, well, okay, no, it is a nice thing. And it is a thing that is annoying to do otherwise.
Yeah, because then
Yeah.
your code references disappear. Like if you were to remove the parameters and add them again, then you have to deal with the dark code that was referencing them.
Yeah. So, um, yeah, it's definitely nice, and we need to be better at doing this sort of thing. It's just like, um, I think really the problem is that functions aren't great to use in Dark. Um, I think that's the main issue that's kind of behind it.
Mm-hmm. Those are most of the big things. Yeah, and we did some more work with integration tests and some internal stuff around CI issues we're facing. You've just recently discovered or like gone into Cert Manager world and found some Google thing around that.
Oh my God, yes. Sorry, what are you looking at here?
I was just looking at release 8, it's the bottom, just going through other internal
Sorry.
improvements.
Yeah. So Cert Manager is a Kubernetes um, plugin. I'm not sure what you would call it. Kubernetes application that gets certs, and it gets it for our customers who are using the custom domain feature. And from a maintainability perspective, this is a nightmare. So there's Cert Manager. Cert Manager we install via Helm, and it was much worse when we didn't install it via Helm. But there's like secrets, and there's scripts, and there's like just a whole lot of everything. So Cert Manager creates containers to be able to reply to Let's Encrypt. So Let's Encrypt provides certs. So it like adds little containers, and then the particular issue I had here was that it doesn't scale them down automatically. But Cert Manager takes these scripts and it puts them into an ingress, which is a sort of a load balancer.
Mm-hmm.
And for the load balancer, we're running Nginx separately from the main load balancer. So if you come to like builtwithdark.com, you're going through a Google load balancer, and then you're getting pretty much directly to our servers. If you go through custom domains, it goes to a different IP address. The different IP address goes to an Nginx, and the Nginx goes to the thing. And so like the headers are like slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just like slightly different behavior. Like it uses HTTP2 versus HTTP3, and also we have to like maintain this Nginx, which is like some containers, and we have to keep on top of like security things and that sort of thing. And we're only doing this because Google's managed domain product did not support more than 15 custom domains.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a new one, which is called Certificate Manager, and it supports 1 million domains per load balancer. And so, like, great, that will last us easily 10 years. And by then, maybe they'll have upped it to 10 million domains, and we'll get 100 years out of it, or whatever.
Yeah.
But just being able to remove all the Cert Manager thing is like, I'm just so excited about it. And so I used it yesterday to add. We were coming up to renewal for the only cert that wasn't automatically managed, which was which was darksa.com. So the static assets feature that we were just talking about removing, we still need to renew the cert whether or not we remove it, because we need it to not break in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But so what I just added it to this certificate manager product, and now Google automatically manages it, and we no longer pay positive SSL any money. Thank
Mm.
God. They were trying to charge us $600 for this thing. It's like,
Wow.
I know, right? Thank you, Google. This is the first time you've saved us money by adding a product. But it's also like automatically managed, so I never need to look at it again.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
Yeah,
redoing certificates is never a fun chore.
yeah. The last twice I've done it, it just took me a week Not because it necessarily takes a week, but because I just like kept procrastinating and putting it off and getting stuck and forgetting how something works. And yeah,
Yeah, glad to have that outsourced. I
yeah.
know we got to cut off in 15 minutes. I guess we should speak briefly about what's on our mind going forward.
Oh yeah. Um, traces. I've been talking about traces for months, but I am actually working on them. Um, and I have it sort of like, it's sort of being stored in cloud storage, and we can fetch it from cloud storage. And um, the main challenge here, if you go to the traces issue, I'll tell you what number it is.
Rewrite the trace functionality in Dark. Move database
Yes,
to be much
maybe
cheaper.
not. So,
Oh, into cloud storage.
yes, move traces from DB into cloud storage. So, and then you scroll down to the bottom to like my comments on June 5th, which has been actually updated all the time.
Which one from
So
June
it's just
5th?
like,
This one?
no, keep going. Lots of checkboxes.
Lots of checkboxes. Okay, here we go. This looks official. Oh, wait, that's not checkboxes.
Nope. Keep
That's
going, keep
not...
going, keep
June
going.
5th
There
was
we
a
go.
busy
There we go.
day.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, the thing is, this is just me editing a comment again and again
Yeah.
over months. So, like, things are done. It's happening, but there's just um, managing the switch from the old feature to the new feature and being like, how do we keep this alive while keeping the new thing going and testing it in production without breaking? Like, actually, I could have had the feature written um, if this was actually a product that was downloadable and we could just switch from one to the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I found myself like just repeatedly kind of like getting stuck and sort of replanning. And I think the current plan actually makes sense, but there's been an awful lot of replanning of this feature.
Yeah, that's quite a mail.
Yeah. So that's me for the next while. And the main goal here, apart from like making our traces sort of scalable, or even sustainable, because like we've long reached the point where like they're not scalable. Um, there's that. There's also like significantly reducing the cost of our data store. So our database costs us $5,000 a month, and it should maybe cost us $1,000 a month. Um, yeah, so that's a main that's a really important thing that I've been putting off for 2 years, which has cost us 60 grand by continually putting that off. So
Well, it sounds like some good progress there. Meanwhile, I'm I'm doing queue worker work. We have it's if you have so the queue as we have it, you can have crons and queues within Dark, which are crons and queue workers. Workers, that's the
I
word.
think we just call them workers in the
Yeah,
product.
just workers.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we can have a situation in which one user can end up eating up all the resources for the queue workers by just posting a bunch of events and preventing other queues from having their events processed. And so we're reevaluating how to manage our queues and process our queues and deal with all that. Right now, they're all in a static number of Kubernetes cluster or a static number of elements in the Kubernetes cluster. Is that right?
There is one deployment with I think 4 pods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so rather than sitting in a Kubernetes cluster, I'm looking into Cloud Run and just different Google offerings. We don't have to manage that ourselves. And also just
Yeah.
general quality of service stuff. This is the first time I've dealt with anything quality of service wise. So that's like the big ticket on my desk is dealing with queue worker. Besides that,
So
yeah.
we got to queue worker because something went down last month, or maybe it went down in October.
Yeah, someone had a bunch of events pending that each took a bit of time. I think they might have been referencing HTTP stuff. And anyway, they took a while. Someone had a big backlog and it just ate up all the resources. And I think QWorker specifically fell down, or was blocked. I think general BWD was fine, but
Yeah, no, I think the queue worker, if I'm not mistaken, it kept working. It was just like backlogged.
yeah. Oh yeah, and then we had to
But
like purge some events
yeah,
to get it through.
the alarms went off because we have alarms if events are not actually going through. Um, so we were woken by our very nasty alarms that go off when the site is down.
Yeah.
Um,
So working on preventing that from happening again. It's
mhm.
I guess it's the goal, and reducing the amount of stuff we have to manage, and just better managing how queues are processed. Since right now they're kind of first in, first out. So that's the big ticket item. Besides that, thinking about deprecating static assets, maybe emailing some users around that, and if I have time, getting that tuple decomposition done will be like my tuple goal of the month. Because I recently implemented list partition because I wanted it just made sense in some dark code I was writing, and then I turned out, oh well, list partition is kind of useless because it returns a tuple, and the the ergonomics of working with tuples right now just isn't there without tuple decomposition.
Yeah.
I think it's going to introduce a lot of interesting fluid problems though. Like what happens if you're
Oh, I
at
do
like a
love
comma
interesting
b,
fluid problems.
if you're at like let a comma b equals and you're like try to backspace from the comma, like but then either you have a b which becomes, or whatever the variable name is, which
Yeah.
references the tuple. Then anyway, there's problems that come up with tuples. I think maybe
I
not.
mean, it seems like the same problem as being in an expression. Like backspacing over a thing. It's like, oh well, there's the second tuple entry is still there, so we don't want to. So we're not going to delete it.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're gonna have to prevent deletions and if there's references.
Yeah, I think we did that on the right hand side anyway.
Okay, cool.
On
So
the right hand side of the compiler terms for the expression.
yeah. So anyway, I have like a vague notion that there might be problems there, but maybe not. Hopefully not. But yeah, I would love to have that tuple decomposition. Um,
Yeah.
and the other like thread that was going on is like we were previously playing on rewriting static assets in Dark, and
Hmm.
importing that feature to there, and that had a really good side benefit of driving forward byte-friendly HTTP client and byte-friendly HTTP handler, which
Hmm.
exist in the shadows right now. Like we have support, but there's no UI and they're not exposed. So I that was one reason that I was like, oh well, we should do static assets just so it kind of drives this other work forward. But I think there's enough demand just for byte-friendly stuff overall.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I would love to see um the main handler, the main HTTP handler is rewritten with built-in dark stuff, and like in particular using records instead of dicts. I think we're sort of like we're a little blocked on. I would like at some point in the next few months to discourage um, uh, heterogeneous use of dicts, polymorphic dicts. I don't know what we would call them, like dicts, dictionaries with or maps where the right hand side are all different types.
Yeah.
That has been what people have been using as records. I would like to add real records, and when you add real records, one of the questions is like, oh, what happens to this thing, the major thing that users are introduced to at the very start, which is a polymorphic dict. Like we can't just change it into a record without breaking all this code. So we need another option there. So that's my big goal.
Nice.
All right. My other thing is onboarding, and in particular redoing the homepage. I've been talking about redoing the homepage for 2 years. But in particular, I have a draft from like last 2 months ago. So it just sort of keeps sliding. So I'm hoping that I don't get excited by something else and let it keep sliding. I'm hoping I get excited by actually doing that at some point.
Cool. I'll be curious to see the draft.
Yeah. I think I sent you the draft.
Okay, I haven't missed it.
Yeah, no, I think it's like I think I wrote it just so long ago you've forgotten it.
Maybe.
Yeah. All right. That's all I got.
Cool. Me too. All right, this was good.
Okay.